So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you're logging in and watching. Uh, we've seen registration from US, Canada, United Kingdom, Middle East, and South Africa, and a couple of other places. So, welcome to this fireside chat, fancy that conversation that we do on regular basis. Today, we are very fortunate. So, my name is Bashir Fancy. I'm the founder CEO at BIZTEK, or Business and Technology Professional Association of Canada. More about that, you can look it up at biztech.org. But most importantly, I want to welcome our guest, Tim Collins from the United Kingdom. He's the Chief Data and Analytics Officer for Kognitiv Corporation. And when you hear him speak about this, you'll find out there's a lot of background and expertise there that we're going to cover. So very quickly, between Dumbhumby, Aimia, Tim has spent 17 years in loyalty, customers intelligence, relationship marketing industry. He's helped some of the world's largest and best known brands, helping them understand and respond to ever-changing needs of their customer. And that's very true right now with what's going on in building relevant, rewarding, and long-term relationship. With him now at the helm of Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Kognitiv, where there's a lot of emphasis on collaborative commerce. If you heard Peter Schwartz has talked about it many times, and to build a safe environment, network of peers independently. He's also built customer loyalty and engagement as of course Kognitiv. So we are very privileged to have Tim join us today, and I think we're going to have a nice laid-back fireside conversation on some very, very important topics. So first, welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Bashir. I'm delighted to be here. I think the pleasure's mine rather than the other way around. But delighted to be here. Great opportunity, I think, to discuss this topic with you. As you say, I think certainly based on sort of recent news and the continuing spat between our friends at Apple and Facebook over Apple's ATT announcements, and certainly based on a lot of the conversations we're having at Kognitiv, I think with our clients, this is a topical topic for us to discuss today.
Fantastic. And so I think best place to start would be, because a lot of people are hearing the term zero-party data, and as I've discovered over a period of time, I don't think everybody really understands fully. Some do. The others may have a certain interpretation of that. Why don't you get us started out by actually explaining what does that mean to?
Great. So, there isn't an internationally recognized standard for zero-party data quite yet. So certainly from Kognitiv's perspective and from my own, it's the data that consumers, customers intentionally and proactively share with brands. So that might be purchase intentions, that might be preferences, beliefs, values, personal context, that really allows that brand and is intended to allow that brand to be able to recognize them, interact with them, and provide them with what they're looking for. So really, zero-party data can be viewed as sort of express directions, if you like, from the customer to a brand to telling them what they want. What are they after?
Fantastic. That's great. And I think I'm sure it's the back of a lot of people's mind what our friends at Facebook and WhatsApp have done in the last few days. And everything we talk about today, you will find out why what we're talking about is very relevant. So the three areas we're going to cover, four areas, I guess, is the growing role of data inside organizations. We're going to talk about data-centric business models and obviously collaborative commerce. Apple's AT&T announcement that Tim just referred to, and kind of what conversations Tim and people at Kognitiv are having with the clients, because you hear that, it becomes very relevant. So why don't we start about the growing role of data inside organizations?
Sure. I mean, I think we started this mentioning flippantly things like Apple and Facebook, but I think there's some trends here that we sort of need to just kind of touch on first.
Sure, absolutely.
And these are not new. These are things that I'm sure lots of people listening to this will be absolutely pretty familiar with. But I think we kind of need to step through some of the recent history to kind of get us to where we are today. So I'm going to look at that from a consumer perspective first, and I'll always go that way in the way I think about these things. We've come from a sort of revolution of high cost push broadcast media that 20 years ago we were all wrapping our heads around how we could get access to primetime TV slots, to moving to a world where there's a sort of plethora of relatively cheap digital channels, all promising hyper personalization, one-to-one communication with a customer. And really the sort of piece from the customer's perspective here is that I think brands have generally not followed the adage of just because you can, you probably should. Because we haven't had the sort of self-control, I think, as an industry to sort of regulate ourselves tightly in the use of and delivery of that personalization, we've proceeded to bombard the customer with all kinds of deluge of offers and promotions and often irrelevant sort of brand and product introductions that the customer wasn't necessarily looking for. That's me being a little harsh and provocative, but that's fine. I think people know what I mean. And then so the customers are pretty fed up with that. There's lots of sort of cynical marketing campaigns. They found themselves sort of spuriously targeted, often with the misuse of their own data. And there's people know examples where companies have fallen foul of regulators or otherwise within that. Their personal data is now sort of bought and sold without their knowledge or understanding. Lots of companies making lots and lots of money from sort of selling that data or trading that data, often with no benefit back to the customer. And so rightfully so, consumers and those that represent them of demanding their privacy and their ownership of their own data back. And I suppose if you put that in statistics, throughout my career and certainly when you think about targeted communications to customers, in numerous occasions we'll be celebrating the fact that we've got 5 or 10% of customers to click on an email or open an offer or an act or on something that we've sent them. But fundamentally that means that 95% of recipients of that thought it was spam, and that's just not good enough. It's not good enough when we have the tools and the capabilities through data, through analytics, to be able to talk to customers in a much more different way. So then we get regulation. So individuals need backing up. So the regulators are coming in, and in response to that rise of sort of digital marketing and the consumer concerns, we've seen successive governments and authorities bring in directives and guidelines and regulations to pull us as an industry, if you like, to book on some of this stuff. And I suppose the EU's introduction of GDPR back in 2016 was probably the sort of biggest ripple on the pond in regard of that. And now we've seen everyone from, Australia and South Korea and Brazil and everybody else following the sort of 7 principles or reimagining them in their own way. And, we now hear China is going to launch its protection for its citizens around the use of data, which is kind of an interesting statement when you consider that China is going to protect the interests of its citizens better than the US or Canada is right now. So with 76% of countries, that was a fact I pulled off the web before this chat, now drafting legislation or legislation in place, we haven't got any choice, as an industry, but to respond to this. And if we go back to the EU, Google, British Airways, H&M, Marriott, all big global brands have all received fines in excess of 20 million euros. I think we're a lot bigger than that at the start of when the fine was issued, but been negotiated down. But and I think we all know or have heard of Facebook setting aside 300 million euros for their potential fine last year. We haven't got any other option. We have to fall into line with this, deliver the customer what they're looking for, give them back their privacy, give them back the data ownership, and market to them in a way that's responsible and actually will gain cut through it because we're treating them with respect.
It's actually interesting that Facebook set up $300 million aside for paying fines. Sometimes you have to wonder, is it to pay the fines or is it to fight the cases in the court against those fines? So but I guess the end impact is exactly what you just talked about. So we've covered the consumers and regulator kind of, and regulators always have a tendency to react, which is interesting. And then the companies, doing the right thing or not doing the right thing, which is really kind of interesting. When we start, now that we're talking about the role of the data, isn't the data-centric business models, right, become even more important now?
I think absolutely. Whether it's through the importance of data science, rise of data science, and the use of data to drive the predictive and optimizing models that we're all building growth of our businesses, in no significant part around. Whether it is in finally managing to talk to customers in the right way, and let's face it, we absolutely need to talk to our consumers in the right way and build that long-term, lasting, engaging relationship with them to get their repeat business. Our understanding of consumers when we're dealing with them in the hundreds of thousands and millions can't be around that sort of one-to-one personal conversation that we might have had companies might have had 200 years ago. So we have to use data as the vehicle through which we can understand that consumer behavior and respond to it. And it's the only way that we can break that down to a granular enough detail for big organizations to be able to split out the personalized responses that they need to make. This stuff is hard. It's not easy to deal with millions of customers and be able to spot one customer and treat them in a specific way. The only way you can do that is through data.
Right. And I assume data in context is what you're talking about, right? Contextual data. So,
yes.
Right.
We have to be listening to the data breadcrumbs that our consumers leave us, be that through the transactions as they transact with us, with their digital footprint with us, be that with their social media posts or responses to advertising and marketing and promotional incentives that we put in front of them. All of that gives us unique insight into the customer. None of that's new. We've been doing that for years. But I think what's changing in that sort of data-centric function is where data has become so important to what we're doing. And we've all become pretty sophisticated on our use of it and what we can leverage it for, both in terms of making business decisions about what our own internal organizations need to do, supply chain, operations, products, design, all that kind of stuff is data driven now in a way that it, direct from the consumer. And we're increasingly personalizing marketing, given what I've just said, hopefully in the right way. But data is at the core of both those things. But getting how do I outcompete what I did last year? How do I beat my competitor by using that data better and smarter? The ability to leverage the data we already have about our customers within our own organizations is starting to narrow. The return on that investment, if you like, is smaller. It's harder to get. And therefore, we've got to look to new data sources to supplement that. And particularly when perhaps some of the leaking tap around second and third party data that we've had from some of these advertising models, which are going to start to be restricted with the changes in AT&T or at Apple or the removal of third party cookies or whatever it is, we're going to need to find new data sources. And this is where really zero party data has a fantastic opportunity. And it's the right and proper opportunity to engage with our customers, to listen to them, and what they're going to tell us and what they do tell us when we ask those questions in the right way is incredibly revealing. Where we've modeled what we thought they wanted based on all kinds of amalgamated data and data lakes that we invested millions in. When we actually go and ask them, ask directly, what are you looking for? What do you think about? Help us provide you with the decisioning around that next purchase or whatever it is. We're learning new things every day, and we have to learn to respond to that increasingly in real time. And we need to learn how to filter out and understand natural language, and process that in a proper way, and all kinds of capabilities that come with it. But zero-party data is going to be the new data, the new oil in data terms. And there's a second part to that, because in and of ourselves as individual companies, getting to that is hard, right? Getting real dialogue with consumers is difficult. And translating that into relevance of response is difficult, because every customer is different. So by collaborating, by working together with peers, this is the Kognitiv model, we can start to supplement that zero-party understanding of customers, and with those customers' permission, build an understanding of that consumer, not just on their interactions with one brand, but on many. What does that mean? Well, that means you have the opportunity to not look at a customer as a customer of a gym, but as a customer who's interested in health and wellness, that might have some health requirements, that might have attitudes to fashion and sports apparel, that might have that their like of sport might manifest itself in their affiliations to sports clubs or memberships to fan clubs. Maybe that also translates to the type of holidays they want, or the how they want to spend their money in other social areas. For a gym company, knowing and understanding the context of that customer across all of those touch points, and being able to collaborate with customers with other brands that operate within it, the ecosystem that can be created around that customer, and the appeal to that customer by bringing them offers, bringing them relevance to their world, that's what's going to differentiate the sort of the winners in the data space in the next few years. Is building on that zero-party data, sharing and working building it with others, and building that ecosystem around customers that just feels they found their home. They found a brand that understands them, that can build on their wishes, their desires. Why would they shop anywhere?
Tim, this actually, there's, as you were speaking and thinking, there are some hidden benefits which people don't think about, which is in big corporations. If you're a bank, certainly it's a pretty good case of, silos all over the place, right? Big silos. And they're also spending millions of dollars, or I should say billions of dollars, in developing stuff. That was thought about 3 years ago when the customer is saying something else. Isn't there a potential benefit here that although we're understanding the customer data and what is needed, and then you're starting to see on the inside where you're spending the money developing things that nobody wants, right? And you're duplicating in all those places. Isn't that a hidden benefit that, if done properly, this could actually bring them tremendous amount of return back?
And it's the nature of the conversation with the customer. We historically take data, analyze it, understand what we think the customer wants. We then invest our millions in innovation and development of new products. Maybe we go through some market research to validate perhaps how we've thought about it. We launch something, and then we market the hell out of it and hope that customers come and buy it. This is an agile development process, and now we have, through zero-party data, we have the opportunity to involve the customer directly, the consumer, in an agile way in that experience, because we can talk to them, we can ask them, and if we engage with them in the right way. And it's the merger of campaign here. There's the merger of these sort of ongoing CRM experiences, digital experiences, and data collection. Thinking about, well, what kind of offer? Well, I might need to incent this customer to share with me, how many children they've got or where they like to go on holiday. And I need to demonstrate trust and transparency about why I want that information, what I'm going to give them back. but yeah, we can build. We can. I think there is absolutely a speed to market in developing with a customer. Because if you've got a dialogue with a customer, you can serve it to one customer or 5 customers or 50 customers or however many you want. You don't have to launch your new product to everyone and hope and pray that it works. You can test it along the route.
Absolutely. If you wind the clock back many years ago, you went to a bank and you had investments with them which were pretty decent, but the branch would not know because the data was never kind of consolidated or shared. And then you get treated, yeah, good or bad, depending on, yeah. Sorry.
I wouldn't want to criticize, many banks, but you're absolutely right. I mean, as a bank customer, you get one division of the bank telling you that to use your debit card, another division telling you to spend it on your credit card, and another division of the bank telling you should be saving it with them, and another one telling you that you should be getting involved in their stock and share sale program or paying off your mortgage more quickly. As a consumer, that just leaves you confused. If the bank had engaged with me and taken my zero-party data and understood what I wanted to achieve, what my financial security ambitions were, or my desire to set my kids up for success as they grow up, then all of those communications around debit, credit, mortgage, borrowing, saving, all now have a slightly different perspective about it because they know and understand what I'm looking for, and they can bring that to me in a way that I'm going to go, wow, they really understand me. This is fantastic.
Yeah, there's a question already popped up, which is good. How does the customer engagement or this differ between B2B and B2C?
Great question. So I think for what the examples we talked have been predominantly around B2C, and customers are engaging with companies all the time, be it online, be it real, be it through a call center or in a store or a bank or wherever. I think that's kind of clear. I think from a B2B perspective, it's harder, right? Because the end user of a B2B service might be an individual, but it's often a department or a division or many people with many different perspectives across it. But it doesn't mean that as a B2B company you shouldn't be using zero-party data. And particularly for platform businesses, this is embedding simple questions into the user experience is a great way of garnering immediate feedback and what were you looking at on that intelligent system when you logged on today? What did you find what you're looking for? What else would you have wanted? These are all simple questions, but if we've got our ear to the ground, we ask them in the right way. Then in a B2B context, it's providing exactly back the kind of feedback that we need.
That's pretty good, actually. Yeah, I totally agree. I think government would be another one that would be benefactor, since I have joked with some of the people there that, listen, I was born on the same day, I live at the same address, and yet every ministry runs its own database, and they don't have the same information on you. Different people have different data, and now we see sometimes people get fined for not paying fine that was already kind of waived in the court. So you have to wonder what exactly information they're looking at. But I think people would be very interested because of how Apple is playing it, especially the Apple ATT announcement. You want to talk about that, because that's very interesting as to how they're playing this.
I think it's a very shrewd move. I mean, there's two ways of looking at it, right? One is they as an organization make their money through the app store, and they don't need consumer information as part of that. And there are now hundreds of thousands of organizations that need to be in the app store and benefit from it. So I think the Apple's opportunity to be the people's champion, given that's how they're now positioning themselves in this, responding to all that legislation, really sets their stall out. And I think that's the best way to go, is to say, to consumers, look, we're going to be completely transparent. There are organizations that use our app store that up to now have had access to your personal information. We believe you as the consumer have a choice about whether you want to share that. So we're going to give you the option. Tick the box if you don't mind, or tick the box if you want to WhatsApp. Great. Now that that's very nice of them. Thanks very much to, and it's easy to applaud them for making that decision. But obviously there's a lot of organisations who were relatively dependent on that data, and they've announced that app tracking transparency piece pretty quickly without a lot of warning, and we're all going to have to respond to that. I suppose the difference of response, if I sort of likened it to someone else, is this is Apple saying privacy and security is really big on the customer agenda. Let's be the champion of it. Let's get out there, ahead of the curve, make a big statement. Great. I look at someone like Google. So, Google's late to the third-party cookies change. I mean, Safari and the others took it out years ago. They're now saying they're going to take it out. I'm not going to be cynical, but perhaps that 57 million euro GDPR fine was a considerable factor in this. But they're not citing customer privacy for taking out third-party cookies. They're saying it's a non-sustainable investment. Is the reason for the change. And you're reading about what they're doing. They're now reportedly working on something they're calling FLoC, so federated learning of cohorts for the analysts amongst you, which is effectively, they're still going to track customers. It's just they're going to aggregate those customers together into cohorts, groups, which then means that rather than getting an ad on Google that was relevant to you, or at least intended to be relevant to you, it's now going to be less targeted because it's going to be you in a group where you're less focused. It's a less relevant content, less targeted. And yeah, the advertising and publishing industry that's been, using that lifeblood from Google for as a large proportion of their ad revenue is going to have to go and think again. So Apple being the consumer's champion, Google screaming and kicking till the end and not kind of getting with the party quick enough, perhaps.
Like you said, it's a master stroke from Apple, regardless of why they did it, because it puts them in a trust category that, look, Apple is not abusing, right?
And I think customers are asking us, what do we need to do? How do we progress with this? What sort of response should we be taking? And we're listing 4 things, and we're saying to them that you need to be completely transparent with a customer. Be clear about what data you're collecting, and what you're going to use it for in the context of that customer. I really want to know whether you've got a dietary intolerance to something, so I can make sure that I don't kill you when I fly on my aeroplane and I give you the wrong meal, or that's important stuff, and there's a reason, a cause and effect of why the customer needs to do it. If we're asking people for more questions that would provide answers to things that are looser or further away, can you tell me when your insurance is up for renewal? Well, the only reason you want to know that is to sell me more insurance. I'm not sure I want to be sold more insurance. That's a harder question to answer. So being transparent, I want to know that because when your insurance is up for renewal, I'm going to give you an amazing offer. Or I will ensure that I'm offering you a reminder service so you're never without insurance. That's a reason that the customer might go, yeah, buy that. That's helpful. That's useful information. I'll share that. We're being transparent. Reciprocity is the sort of second thing we're saying. So, look, increasingly skeptical, savvy customers, which I talked about before, they're kind of understanding that their data has a value. They're understanding that organizations want it, and they're gathering it and extracting value from it, and they want something back in return. That obviously for a Google Ads or a Facebook, they're providing a service that is inexorable to the way in which we're leading our lives these days, and access to those ads is the way that's funded. That's not going to change, but reciprocity says, okay, I want to absolutely understand what is the exchange here. I'm going to give you this data, or give it access to me as a customer. You're going to do this, and I'm going to get what. So have to spell that out. Now, obviously, we come from a lot of loyalty, with a lot of loyalty programs where loyalty currency and becomes an amazing way of providing that payment back. But it has to be a kind of overtly part of the ongoing dialogue with the customers. I'm asking for this, I'm going to do that with it. This is what you're going to get for it. The next one is control. The customer has to feel in control in this. We have to give them the options to actively opt into stuff. We can't just say, opt out when you don't want to. We've got to say, come and be part of this. If you don't want to, leave, but we'll willing to control that. And one of the challenges we've got is we start to get organizations collaborating around customers with their customers' permission. When that customer removes that permission, then we've got to get that feedback back to both of those collaborating parties and manage the right to be forgotten in GDPR parlance in the right kind of way. So customer has to be in control. And the last piece is everything here is about building trust with the consumer. And it's through that trust that they'll share more with you, and that the ensuring the security and appropriateness of use around the data, are now table stakes. We cannot put ourselves in risk of being seen by the customer to be doing something, that's spurious or dangerous, because the people will vote with their feet. Now, Apple, AT&T, back to your kind of question. Early signs, certainly from the US, is that somewhere around 90+% of customers are saying, no, I don't want to share my information. I think that's probably going to be at the extreme end globally, but that's huge to say that as Apple consumers, they don't trust the brands that they're using apps on every day to share their information with. So that's a great measure of across all industries. That's how much our consumers trust us to have information about them. 95% of US customers don't trust companies enough to share information with them. Wow.
That's stunning. Yeah, that's yeah, absolutely. Just an offshoot of that is part of the problem. The fact that, and I'm now talking about consumer, or we're talking about corporate companies doing stuff, but hasn't the part of the problem been messed up further because of the fact that it's free, and consumers then, the reason why we got into the mess in the first place is it's free, so it should be good, right?
Yeah, I think look, I think Google's a great example, right? We all, it's become a verb. We're all on it. We're all using it to some extent. And there's this sort of expectation of what do you mean if there's no adverts, I'd have to pay for access to it? Well, of course there would, but we've lost the reciprocity equation for users of Google has been forgotten. They've not been clear about how that works, how this is funded. And perhaps we need to have the alternative of, I would pay a subscription to have an ad-free Google experience and access to all the wonderful things that they make available, from translate to maps and everything in between. Or I can, I'll accept a level of ads. TV's already going this way, right? You can choose to pay, or you can choose the ads. I think that's the openness, that's control in the consumer's hands that I talked about. It's fairly obvious to me where this is going. We just got to get on the bandwagon.
I think that's very important. I don't know if it's a question or a comment from Tom saying, I think B2B buyers feel like a fire was aimed at them. Interesting. I think it's more a comment than a question. The other question was that we're collecting data. Are we able to effectively use that data to drive any real business?
Yeah, and I think this is, I ran the customer intelligence business for the last 5 years, and was a sort of key part of it for a long time. And I think as technology has allowed us to sweep up all these different data sources into ever enlarged data lakes, and our data scientists excite us with stories of the next algorithm that's going to make us gazillions. It's easy to sort of fall into that trap. And I think really for me at least, this comes down to some real basic stuff. What are the business imperatives we're trying to solve for as organizations? What are the fundamental questions that if we could answer, would make the biggest difference? Then the question is, well, what data do I need or would I benefit from to be able to answer that question? Not what data have I got? How shall I fish in my data lake to try and find the fish that's the answer? Start with a question in mind. Find the data you need, and that's where I think we are increasingly finding that through collaboration, brands will find the data they need, not by buying a list of third-party data, and not by kind of some latent historic information that they may be borrowed from the partner in terms of second party, but live data, information that they can use now. And then it is building that into business processes, building that into operational decision making, translating the outcomes of those data scientists into something that business people can use, that are really linked to a business process. That's how we get value from this stuff. Be really hard on what the question is, hard on what data you need to be able to answer it, and then make sure you've got enough of it and in the right way presented to the right people in the organization to make the decisions day in, day out, or in better yet in real time, as part of the dialogue with the customer.
So that brings up a couple of questions. One is the revenue generators within the company, or the guys who plan, they need to take a step back and really rethink this, because we don't know where it's going to go, right? What changes will happen. And we know the regulators have a tendency to react or overreact, is probably the best way to put it. Self-regulation doesn't work, so we know that is a challenge anyway. But that's the one part of the problem in terms of revenues and how you go about it. Isn't there a second challenge, and you can take your time to comment on that, is that we're seeing, for example, Google now has a Google suite and they do all sorts of stuff, and we know that they're now companies kicked out. I think it's called Skiss. I haven't looked at it in great detail, but you can do exactly what you do on that. It's like a not-for-profit type organization, no different than Brave, which is a browser, says, okay, if you share your data with somebody, we will give you some money back. So is that a potential model between the two when you look at the revenue?
I think there are definitely going to be some new revenue models, right, where the customer has a different role to play. I was talking to someone yesterday from a loyalty association who said they'd gone around all of the loyalty programs that they were a member of and had requested under GDPR all the data that was held on them. So they have a database of all their data and all the data trail that they had left behind. That in and of itself is quite interesting. That if every customer of every program requested their information, we've seen open banking now, where you can combine your financial information. Why not open data? I think that's is certainly a likely outcome. Someone will find the solve for bringing the value of data back to the customer, the consumer directly, and the consumer wants their value for it. They don't want to put into a search engine, I'd like new Nike trainers, and 3 weeks later still be getting trainer banner ads. They want to I want to get an offer immediately. I want Nike trainers, and find that there are 4 or 5 companies fighting for their customer. And if they're prepared to sell their intention, their zero-party data, that I want to buy a pair of Nike trainers, by the way, they need to be this color, this size, available to be delivered on this day. That's all a customer specification that we as organizations would love to have. Actually, the customer is now increasingly aware that information about themselves has a value, and we may end up paying them for it.
Yeah, that's actually very interesting. So I think it's a moving target. They need to stay on top is basically what your advice is, which is pretty good advice because this business, but uh, that's why I referred to when I said, without naming any banks or whatever, a project that they'd approved 2, 3 years ago, right? Requirements had run 2, 3 years ago, and they went ahead with it because the money was budgeted. I mean, are you kidding me or what? But this is how they operated because as long as you're getting the profit on the other side, you got monopolies, you get away with it. I think that's going to be under a lot of stress, that type of thing. So yeah, I think you're hitting some very interesting parts. We haven't even talked about what China is doing in this area, and I'm talking about specifically Alibaba and all that. You want to
Well, we mentioned the Chinese government putting in their series of legislation, and I think that might be a surprise to people. Um, but I think for any platform business like an Alibaba, like Amazon, perhaps um, they're their business model is about selling stuff to people. Their business model is driven by data. The way in which you search for the products that you want within their platform is in of itself sharing some level of zero party data. I want this. They're providing based on how people start to what they actually bought, looking at the decisions in mass of how people have gone through those decisions, and are providing now the filters on the left-hand side for you to work out, do you want to choose by color, by size, by brand, by whatever. And those filters change on every product and every click that you make, and it gets a little bit incrementally smarter. That's we could all learn from that.
yeah, no, that's
you know, for an Alibaba now, absolutely when full financial service through to delivery, the ownership of the customer through that entire experience, and the control over anybody wanting to use their platform and engage with that customer. That's a complete barrier between any of those brands and that customer. Alibaba now owns that relationship completely end to end. How to pay, how to deliver, how to market to. How's a brand you get cut through with that customer? Where are you representing your brand values? Where are you communicating with them about the things that you believe in and that they believe in, and that you're building that long-term relationship? It's devolving back to a incredibly transactional relationship. I've got an infinite inventory as a customer. I can search for what I want, decide what I want to buy, and it's delivered the next day. That's that intermediation of brand to customer is not something we should give away lightly, because it is giving Alibaba, Amazon, or whoever it is, really control over the keys to the car.
right, absolutely. And I think it partly goes to something you already kind of talked about briefly, which is we know they're making pretty strong moves in Africa and elsewhere. Is that I think, as our friend Hilton has said a few times, that you don't have to endorse them or anything like that, but they are long-term players. Their thinking is very long-term, whereas we can't in North America. Thinking about the next quarterly report is like is thinking very far, because it's always about revenue, shareholder value. We don't think about this, and I think it's coming back to haunt us now. Would you agree?
I do, actually. I think the short-term financial cycle is we're going a little bit off topic, but yes, certainly the short-term financial cycle that the street is looking for doesn't reward organizations that want to build long-term, meaningful relationships with customers. It is a demand for short-term trade, short-term sales spike, short-term uplift that was a need that was best scratched with that back to what I was saying before. Let's send out as many emails and messages to customers as we possibly can, because if 5% of them enact on something, we get a bit of a sales spike, and that's an answer. It's not, because we're just perpetuating promiscuity in customers.
Yeah, that's actually very true. If if I was a CEO of a big company and I came to you, right, and I think you talked about some of the stuff already, but uh, what are the priorities you would push me in saying, by the way, you need to really think about this. If you're talking to your clients, but more importantly, as a company, I come to you and saying, by the way, I don't know where it's going. What are the things I need to worry about? Where should I prioritize on this data centric models, collaboration? What advice would you give me?
Um, I mean, I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I've
Yeah,
kind of
that's fine.
said. You know, the advice is you've got to have a meaningful, ongoing dialogue with your customer, be that a customer or be that a business, a consumer or a business. You've got to really build that relationship with them. That's a two-way dialogue. You've got to listen to them, and listening in a modern sense means zero-party data, feedback, listening, and response to that. You can't just kind of garner this information and hold it. You've got to respond to it. Align that to addressing the stuff that's keeping you awake at night. You know, the business imperatives. What are the three things that you're thinking, oh my God, how am I going to solve for that? What data do you need? How's my engagement with my customer going to answer that? And then let's design the engagement process, loyalty, marketing, digital, all together, design that engagement process to draw out from the customer the data we need, if we can get it there. And if we can't get it there, then let's collaborate with another organization and get it from and get it from them, or get it together and use it. Use the benefits of one to in a shared way to benefit the other. Build up that data mart, and then keep going back and keep recycling this information, because it's a virtuous circle. It goes around. The more data we collect, the better response we can have. The more loyal and engaged the customer is, the more they spend with us, the more data we get, and we go around again and again. That's how we win.
I know that's pretty good actually. And we won't go into that. Just a comment from my side. The more I think about it, everything you talked about, zero party data and understanding your customer well, it will actually indirectly help the security posture quite considerably.
Oh, yes.
You know,
Zero-party data, if asked in the right way, comes with its own customer permission to use it.
right, right.
It inexorably links to it. We kind of mentioned that, but for asking a customer, what brands would you like to receive an offer like this from? What other companies would enrich your health and wellness experience? That gives you. Would you like it if we connected you to them? That permissioning beats, it's direct from the consumer, beats all of the GDPR permissioning and security guidance, because you've asked the customer what they want, they've told you, and then you do it for them. Fantastic.
And you understand their behavior, which is critical. Then
Yes.
when they do a transaction that's out of pattern or whatever, or when AI gets enhanced, which today is mind-boggling how some of the fraud and things that happen, right?
The problem is that customers are fickle, and they change their minds, and we all know that. So
yeah.
just because I think I was buying a new car this week doesn't mean my wife has told me I'm not allowed to next week. So,
yes, that's true.
It's in the moment, and I think that's the latency of zero-party data is a consideration here. That some things we ask and answers we get have a half-life, if you like, that's quite short. Could be incredibly powerful if we can deliver against that. Others are much longer term, but we have to be aware of that latency.
Is that and you touched on this is very interesting, and you touched on the regulations, GDPR as an example. Many other countries are moving there. Is there anything the government or companies can do to incentivize good behavior? Because we tend to go with either is this or the penalties, right? Is there something we could do to change their behavior? Whether it's be taxes, whatever it may be. I know we haven't, I hadn't thought about it, but I'm just saying there's a potential here.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking of sort of approval ratings or star systems or what have you. I think where for a consumer looking at a business and knowing that it's 5-star approved by would give them accreditation would give them a certain level of confidence about building that trust to share. So I think yeah, there is that would be an interesting avenue. Perhaps we should set something up, Bashir, as an independent organisation together that would endorse and validate, organisation steps towards this. And there's no one listening. We might copy.
It's funny you should say that. I was thinking about this. That there was a intent when years ago to try and say, we'll give you an emblem if you meet certain requirements, we'll audit you every now and then. That you do that, we'll put it on your website or as part of your business to say you're a trusted entity, right? So that people can do business with you with confidence that these guys do meet the bar.
I guess as all these sort of famous case studies show, though, it's the one-off failure that just strips away all that trust in one foul swoop.
Right.
And it's so difficult to rebuild. Public apologies printed in national papers and what have you from CEOs, begging for forgiveness for sharing their customers' information. Or nobody wants to see that.
No, absolutely not.
And the accreditation then becomes, is so on-off based on that last worst behaviour. But yeah, I think customers do want to understand the relative merits of organisations. So if there was a way to reward good behaviour, why not?
Right, because you're baking into the culture, not painting it on. So really, it becomes part of everyday thing. I mean, when you look at many of these compliance areas, the auditors come in once a year. I remember in the old days, not much has changed. It's changed differently. Is that everybody would be running for cover? That the auditor is here. Why would you run for cover? Make me a friend, right? Do the right thing. Use me to actually understand where the risks are. Which is, if you look at the risk management role, it's not there. Then you got security guys in the left side, but it's all revolves around data-centric models, really, at the end of the day, to understand, right? So that brings me to a question, and you can take whatever time you want, because from my standpoint, be the final question, unless somebody else has got it out there, is that everything you talked about many years ago, and I've always seen security in that realm, but not that people do that. Isn't this a significant competitive advantage if it's done properly, the trust that you talked about, if done properly?
I absolutely think it is. Customers are looking for people to take the lead in this. They're uncertain of who to trust, because, as we've said, big household names have been found wanting. So I think for any organisation that can paint themselves and act, and this isn't about just the marketing. This is about action speaking louder than words. But perhaps following Apple's lead, but being able to demonstrate that you've got the customer's back, that you are going to curate that information, give them back what they're looking for, help them lead a better life, whatever it is. I think that is the key differentiating factor that will build customer loyalty. That's where my career has been, is building customer loyalty. Customers want to trust, and they are loyal to companies that they can trust. And increasingly, that trust is about data privacy, data security. So yeah, I think it's going to be a key differentiator between organizations, and something that we need to get on top of.
I think that's fantastic. Is there any parting thoughts you want to park that people can rethink? Because I think there's some phenomenal things here. And for the people who are actually watching it now, we will have, of course, the recording will make it available, because there's so much of stuff, fantastic stuff here that you may actually need to hear it a couple of times to understand what was talked about, because we've covered some significant area. And I think I'm convinced that we need to do this again in part 2, because there's a lot of stuff here, right?
Look, I think this is new. We're all learning this together. Our Kognitiv, as you said very nicely and eloquently at the beginning, in introducing me, is about collaborating, getting businesses to collaborate around this, and actually it's collaboration around this as a topic, which will put us all on the right path. So would welcome further conversation with anyone listening to this or watching it later. We're forming our opinion as this stuff kind of rolls out, and working out what best practice looks like for zero-party data, for collaborative data, for how we solve for a world in which access to data is going to be somewhat different, and we'll do that together. So
absolutely, and I look forward to that. And the answer is yes. I think we need to do that, because there's a tremendous amount of information, and this is kind of changing real time. The people who are involved, right, actually consider themselves, privileged that they can actually play a leadership role here by doing the right things, right?
Absolutely.
And you're obviously doing that, which is fantastic. And anybody who was wondering what Tim's background was, well, guess what? There's no guessing left to do, because you heard him speak to each of these. Now you know why we said he was the best person to speak on this topic, and he just showed you that, and it's fantastic. Tim, thank you very much for doing this.
Well, absolutely.
And even sitting on this side, I have to say that I've learned a lot of new things, and I've also seeing some comments that have come in equally good. And I think as people go through and hear this thing again, they will realize what we're talking about. And guys, you wanted to wait too long. Hopefully by tomorrow we will have this recording up and about. And if there's any questions you have, or you want Tim or somebody else to answer some stuff for you, hey, very welcome. Fire off. The contact information is there, or you can send it to us and we'll put you in touch, and we'll try and do more things like this. Is what we try to do. So, and we thank Tim from the bottom of our heart to have spent the time today to help us out. It's actually 6 p.m. for him, so it is, right? And I know it's very hot here. As I was going to wear a jacket, my wife did a smart thing by turning the air conditioning on, and I was about to take it out. So anyway, thanks, Tim. Fantastic. I really, truly appreciate your doing this, and we will be talking to you offline to, take this further. So all the very best for doing this, and let me